In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace the seat cushion on this Ford F-450. This is the lower seat cushion, not the backrest. I'm going to work on the passenger side, but the same procedure applies to the driver's side. Let's get started. In the front of the seat, you'll see two 18mm bolts. Take both of those out. That's one. And two. Now you're going to want to slide the seat forward by pulling up on this and go all the way forward. And on the back side, you'll see two 18mm mounting nuts, one on each rail. Take them both off. Lift it up, and now remove the seat from the truck. Now we have to disassemble this side panel here. I'm going to start by popping out this piece. Use a plastic trim tool if you can't grab it by hand or with your fingers. Remove it. This exposes a Phillips head screw holding this plastic piece in, but for me, not only is the screw stripped out, but the piece is broken, and I'm going to assume that's from someone trying to take it out, stripping it, and then having to break it off in order to get this piece off. So you should have to remove this. I'm going to skip past this step because it's pointless for me. We're going to move up at the top where you see this small panel. This is actually a couple push clips that go straight down into the rail of the seat. You're going to have to pry up on these in order to release them. That broke in my case, so that's okay. I'll install new push clips when the time comes. This is where they clip on the back side. And now you should be able to remove this panel, or at least most of the way. On the back side of that panel, you'll have a similar push clip style retainer. There we go. Take that out, and if anything, I'll use this for the front and then put two universal push clips on the back where you can't see it. Anyway. Pull this panel off. Now lift the seat off the ground, pull on the slider lever, pull or push both rails all the way down. This will expose the top two 10mm bolts that hold this bottom cushion onto the rails of the seat. So let's take both of these out. Now let's move the rails all the way up so we can get access to the lowermost 10mm bolts. These two on the back, you are most likely going to have to do them by hand just because a power tool won't fit in here. There we go. Once you break them free like that with a bigger ratchet, you should be able to use a ratcheting wrench or just a regular wrench. You could take the rails off, but then you start getting into lining them back up again and disconnecting the two halves of the rails. So I like to avoid that if possible. That's as much as that one's going to come off. Before we continue, let's pull off this T50 bolt that holds the seat belt latch in. Set this aside. Now we can freely move this around and finish removing this 10mm bolt. There we go. Now on the side with the adjuster lever, there are two 13mm bolts that we have to remove. To pull this plate off of the bottom part of the cushion, let's take all these off. At this point, you're going to want to pull this away that way and the bottom cushion the opposite direction. That's how you separate the two on this side. This side has a hinge that has basically a pin. On the bottom side, it's almost impossible to see, and then the top has an arm that slides onto the pin. This is what it looks like. I'm going to try and pry these two apart. If they weren't so rusty, it would be a little bit easier. There we go. All right. Now let's take these two plastic pieces off that are broken. I know I said earlier I wouldn't have to touch them, but it looks like they do hold on to this cover of the seat, and hopefully if I use a larger screwdriver, I can get enough grip on this to loosen it up. Looks like it worked for this one. So we'll remove this piece, take it off, set it aside, try this one. Okay, so it worked. That's good. Take both of these off. And now what we have to do is go from underneath, basically peel away this part of the cover, unhook it from the bottom of the seat. There we go. Just like that. Let's do this over here as well. Just go all the way around, unhook all of them. And now we should just be able to peel this back, expose the cushion, which is what we're after. Okay, that's separated. Pull these push clips off of here. Alright, so this is the frame of the seat. Here's our cushion. Looks like we have to get these disconnected. Over here, down the center, you'll see some of these retaining rings. I'm just going to cut them off. Okay, so there's our seat cover, which is in good condition, so at this point we can reuse this, but this is the cushion that we're replacing. There you have it. Now take your new seat cushion if you had one, and you want to make sure you have the right kind, because as you can see, this is more, even though it's a single seat cushion, it is more of a bench seat style cushion. It's a more flat cushion as opposed to the bucket seat style that is deeper in the middle. So you definitely want to make sure you have the one for your particular trim and your particular seats. Now that you've set it up on the frame of the seat, you want to take this piece and kind of drape it over, and then put two push clips in it, which are the ones that we removed last. And what this does is it'll hold the cushion in place on the frame of the seat temporarily while you resecure everything else. And yeah, sure, it's still going to move around, but at least it won't fall off. And it'll allow you to more easily maneuver this, because we'll have to move it around quite a bit. So at this point, as you can see, it's staying on. And you want to make sure that the front here has a lip. It goes around the front of the seat. If it's caught like this, it's not going to seat all the way, and you'll have a lot of trouble putting the cover on. Speaking of cover, it's now time to put this back on. So I'm going to just loosely drape it over to make sure it's not twisted in any way. And then grab whatever corner lines up first and stretch it over most of the way, but then you want to get the other one also started. Okay, you want to kind of squish the cushion down a little bit as you try to bring it over. Okay, make sure everything is lining up, all these holes that allow you to bolt on the backrest, the lever, and everything else, the seat rails. So it's important that those are lined up. Let's hook on one of the sides here, clamp it over, and instead of going around in a circle, I'm actually going to go across to this bottom side, pull this, hook this over. And now both sides are locked in. And now we can do these, the front and the back. Hook this on. And in the back. All right. This is now re-secured. Now to put the two halves together, you can see the bottom has a pin, and like I explained earlier, the top has a plastic bushing basically, and it has a hole in the middle that the pin lines up with and slides right in. I put some silicone paste on it. You just use some grease, and usually really the pin in this entire seat area should not be that rusty for you. This being a work truck, it probably saw some rain and other kinds of weather. But what needs to happen now is you need to get this arm pressed down into the cushion, slid further in, and then back up. And I'm explaining this now because it'll be difficult to explain to show once I'm actually doing it. But you need to squish it into the cushion, and as soon as it wants to slide up and over, you have to press it down. There we go. So, alright, make sure it goes all the way down, just like that. The two halves need to be nice and flush, and that's why I put silicone paste on it. Like I said, you can put some grease or spray it with some lubricant, but it makes the installation a lot easier. Now we can flip it over and bolt on the other side. Once you have these lined up, put in your two lower bolts. These were the 13mm headed bolts, and tighten them up. The torque for these two is 37 foot-pounds. It's important that your seat stays together, obviously, so make sure they're nice and tight. Now let's get the rails reconnected. Of course, make sure they're going the right way. And I have one bolt at the top here ready to start in, just so it can basically hold itself in place while I start the other ones. I'm not going to tighten any fully until they're all started. Sometimes you have to keep moving this around in order to get the bolt to thread on by hand. But that one's on. So now let's get this front one on. Be careful when you do this. You don't want to get your hands pinched here. Line this one up. Alright, so I got this side rail lined up as it should. Let's flip this around, put the other side rear bolt in, because that one lines up. Make sure it starts. Alright, once it does, I'm going to pull on the lever, bring this one back, pull the front in, or put the front one in. And now, because they're all started and both rails are pushed back, I'm just going to tighten these two front ones up. And then we'll move to the back and do those. Now push the rails forward. Let's tighten up the rear bolts. That's tight. Okay. The torque for these four rail bolts is 18 foot-pounds. I can't get a torque wrench on these rear ones, so I'm going to take a long wrench with some leverage and just make sure they're nice and tight. That felt like 18 foot-pounds to me, if not a little more. And do the same thing to the bottom one, and then I will be able to torque the two front ones. All right, that's tight. So now pull the rails back. Watch your fingers. That's one. And two. Let's put the seatbelt latch back on. Make sure you don't put it on backwards by accident. Get the T50 Torx bolt started by hand. Definitely don't cross thread this. Once you're sure it's started, hold the latch in place, tighten this up. The torque for this is 26 foot-pounds. It's important that this is secured properly because this is, of course, where your seatbelt latches into, and this is a safety item. Now take this cover, which if you remember, ours had a couple broken pieces that used Phillips head screws in here. So if yours still has that, obviously reinstall those screws, but for me, they don't attach to anything, so I will not be reinstalling them, but I will line it up and put the corresponding push clips in. Had one of these at the front, just like that. And then I just have two other more universal push clips that'll lock this in on the back side. And I chose to do it this way because you're less likely to see this end as opposed to the front side. And now you would put your two Phillips head screws back, and then this cover, which slides in over here and clips in. Perfect. And bring the seat back in. Line it up with all four mounting spots. There we go. Let's put these bolts back in on the front since these are lined up, ready to go. Make sure they thread in properly and don't cross thread. Since we're here, let's just tighten these down. The torque for these is 41 foot-pounds. All right, let's do the two rear ones. And put the two rear mounting nuts back on. Tighten these up. And torque them if you have a torque wrench that'll fit in here. Also to 41 foot-pounds. That's one. All right. Bring your seat back, and there you have it.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.